So the next thing is I'm getting to talk about something that I absolutely love, which is HWE. Now, I could do a presentation on skilled communication, honestly, for several hours, and we could do role playing. So I will just say up front, I am squishing in the most important information that I think you need, but I am available for any questions you have afterwards, or if you want to talk about a particular challenge. I'm happy to do that. I've done one-on-one coaching with people before around having conversations, and I'm happy to continue to do that. So, there's the healthy work environment standards, and there's six of them. And we've always been proud at AACN to say there is not one standard that's more important than the other. But I think we would all agree that if we can't speak to each other in a respectful way or in a way that communicates, what we're trying to say and welcomes communication from other people, pretty much all the other standards seem to fall apart. So, although there's not one most important one, we know skilled communication plays a very important part in our ability to have a healthy work environment. So, Michelle, if you can go to the next slide. So, gosh, we've been talking about HWE since 2000, 2001. And one of the things that really spurred this on was AACN partnered with a company called Vital Smarts, and they looked at some research around what happens in healthcare organizations when there is not a good communication going on or that respect and trust that I'm talking about. And they did find that unhealthy work environments do create and contribute to medical errors, basically to bad things happening to our patients. So they put a lot of emphasis in trying to understand this situation, and that's really how the standards were birthed. And we also found in that research that when people lived in an unhealthy work environment or worked in one, they were less likely to speak up when they noticed that something bad was going to happen. And I was shocked by it that they would not call out another practitioner and say, hey, are you sure this is VTAC and we want to give lidocaine? Something like that. But people that don't live in healthy work environments sometimes are afraid to speak up that there'll be retaliation or retribution. And so medical mistakes were allowed to be made even though they could have been prevented. I think we would all agree that would be a really sad thing to happen. Next slide, Michelle. So basically, these are the critical elements of a skilled communication standard. Each one of the standards has some things, bulleted points that we try to condense to make it easy to at least get off a running start to understanding them. But basically, what we're saying is, look, you need to be clinically competent, but you also have to be skilled in communicating. And it's easy to bring problems to people. It's easy to say what's not working, but skilled communicators seek solutions. And so the conversation is solution seeking, not just dumping problems on somebody. If you want to read a good book about that, um, oh gosh, something about the monkeys. I just forgot the name of it, but there's a good book out there, a real quick read about the monkeys. And it's people who come into your office who want to dump their monkeys and leave them for you to care for them. And they don't want to be part of the solution. Skilled communicators really want to be solution seeking. We invite and hear all perspectives. So, one thing you want to ask yourself if you're having a conversation, is this the right person to have the conversation with? If you're having a meeting, have you brought the key stakeholders together so that when you do have a conversation, you're making sure you're getting the points of view of all the people that will be impacted by this? One time I worked a night shift and they made a decision to change the medication administration times. And back then, and this is back in the day, there was one RN in an ICU of like 10 patients with three LPNs, and LPNs couldn't give IV meds. And so when my head nurse came in the morning, I said, how did we come to this decision? And she said, well, now the antibiotics are frozen, they have to be defrosted, and so we're going to have you give 2 doses on night shift. And I said, well, wait a second. It sounds like the issue you're trying to solve is medication preparation. Medication administration belongs to nurses. Was there a nurse at the table when this decision was made? And she just basically said, the decision's non-negotiable. Let's just figure out how to make it work. And then we hold self and others accountable. And this is called 200% accountability. It's one thing to say, I'm going to make sure I do the right thing, but it's a little tougher to say that when I witness someone else not doing the right thing, I'm going to find a gentle way to call them out. That's 200% accountability. And then all of your hospitals have some type of zero tolerance for abuse and disrespect. You have a policy. There's a difference between having a policy and actually enforcing it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about inappropriate behavior in a second. Next slide. So what does skilled communication look like? Well, it begins with listening. And, I'm sure you've been in a conversation where someone's looking at their watch, they're looking out the window, they're looking out their door, they're looking at their phone, maybe they're even on their phone while they're talking to you. It is about eye contact and ignoring distractions. And so if you're going to have an important conversation, figure out how you can set yourself up for success. Maybe you need to turn off your phone. Maybe you need to give your phone to someone else. Maybe you need to say at the beginning of the meeting, I have a sick child at school, and the school nurse may be calling me, and I will have to take that call. So I just want to let you know in advance that if my phone rings, I will be looking at it. That's a respectful way of letting somebody know I'm really, you're really important to me, but I do have this pressing issue, and I want to go ahead and have this conversation. But at the same time, I cannot ignore my responsibilities. So set yourself up for success. And make sure you pick a location. If it's an important conversation, can it be private? Can it be held in a place that's not full of distractions, which would definitely not be the nurse's station, right? Next slide. Another skill around skilled communication is to be curious, not judgmental. I'll be honest with you, this is something that I've struggled with my whole career. I am one to, oh, yep, I've got the answer. You've got 3 words out of your mouth, and I've already figured out what the solution is. And honestly, when I've forced myself to sit and listen, the solution that's come from someone else usually is much better than what I thought. So I would just encourage you to be curious and not judgmental. Ask open-ended questions. Don't start off by giving your opinion or your position on something, especially if there's a power gradient, like you're in charge or you're running a committee. People have told me the feedback I've gotten is, Mary, you're so passionate about something that when you speak up, they just know they're not going to change your mind. So they don't bother giving another, idea. And that's sad. That makes me sad. So you may be passionate about something, figure out a way, whether you got to write a note on a piece of paper in front of yourself, sit on your hands, whatever works for you. But try to be open to hearing other people and not telling them right out of the gate, well, this is the idea I think we ought to do. What do you think? You've already somewhat put up the guardrails as to where we're headed. And then ask clarifying questions. Don't be afraid to say, could I get a little bit more information on that? Or you mentioned such and such. Could you be more specific? That's really important. And it should not be threatening to the individual that, oh, I should have covered that. You ask it in a way with an upbeat, in a curious manner, and to help to draw out more information so that you're in a better position to know how you're going to respond or maybe what you should be thinking about. And then when possible, use singular language. You guys, the team, we, they. Sometimes it's really best, especially if it is a more critical conversation, to make it about you and me and not bring in other people by using pronouns, right? If it's I feel this way and what you did or what I need you to do is much better communication than saying, you guys need to do, work harder on this or whatever. And we're not very happy with it. No, be willing to say, I'm struggling a little bit with this, and I'd like to see if you could help me understand how we can get through this better. So try to be singular. It feels a little less intimidating or confrontational to be we and they, but it's much better if it can be I and you. Next slide, please. It's so important to be confident about what you're talking about. If you don't know, be willing to say, I don't know. I took a job at Home Depot and I'm a master gardener. And I was so excited. I thought they were going to put me in the gardening department. And they did. And they put me in the electric department. So I can't tell you how many times I said to somebody, I don't know the answer to that, but let's go find someone who does. And now we'll both know. And it somewhat like lessens it for you that there should have been an expectation that you know everything, because of course you don't know everything, right? But, we have to be willing to admit when we don't have the answer. That is just so key because you may be in a position that when you speak, everyone listens. And so you have got to be aware of that, of the implication and the power that you may have in your voice. And so be careful not to make it sound like you absolutely know. If you think you know, well, kind of position it that way. Say, well, I think I know that, and let's go find out for sure. If you feel the need to kind of let them know you might know something, but resist the urge to talk like you're Merrill Lynch when you really don't know what it is you're talking about, right? Let's go find that answer together. Next slide, please. I don't know if any of you listen to Brene Brown, but my God, she's like a hero to me. And when we are trying to have a good conversation with somebody, and I'm not talking about planning the unit's party or your department's, baby shower or something. I'm talking about important issues, right? You need to have trust with each other. And it doesn't mean you like each other. Okay. I've worked with a lot of people that I haven't particularly liked, but you do need to have trust if you're going to have skilled communication occurring. And so Brene says it's a relationship between equals when you're compassionate. And that really sets the tone for trust. So it's so important when you're trying to open the lines of communication to create a safe environment, to make it okay for someone to talk about something or to give you an answer that they may think that you would not like. Like I have said to people, you have my permission, to call me out on this. You have my permission that if you ever hear me saying something that doesn't sound like Mary Bylone, I want you to say, yo, Mary, what's happening here? That doesn't sound like you. Or last week you said this. I set it up by saying, you have my permission, because sometimes people feel, especially if you have a title, that they're not able to do that safely. So make sure that you are creating a safe environment for people. If you're getting a lot of yes and no's in the conversation, that should be a little bit of a red flag to say, I don't know if I've got trust going on with this person. And if that's the case, take a moment to pause from the topic you're talking about and rebuild the foundation of trust. So you might, you stop and say, you know what? I'm not getting the response from you. Like, this seems to be like you're upset with me. Can we talk about that? Because I just think you walk on water. I think you're the smartest person on the team. I couldn't do this without you. What's going on here? You just don't seem like you feel like you can talk to me about this. That helps to open it up to let them know because sometimes people they're not reacting to what you're saying. They're reacting to why they think you're saying it. And so you want to make sure that they think you're saying it for the same reasons as what the words are that are coming out of your mouth, right? So always take a pause and take a moment to reemphasize, the trust, the relationship, and get to the reason why maybe they're reacting the way they are. Next slide, please. So as much as we can try to be really great at communication, there are some inner just setups for us to fail or to not do our best. And a lot of it has to do with technology. And as much as I love technology, and any of my AACN friends can tell you, I mean, I rely so heavily on technology. We all do. I don't know how most of us could survive if we didn't, right? There are some things that just come out of using technology that create unsafe situations for conversation or allow people to get to places that they wouldn't if you were talking to them in person. So, social media, things that we post about ourselves and things, if people see that, they draw an inference about who you are as a person. And then when they come to have a conversation with you, they're putting those glasses on and they may only be seeing you through that lens instead of the person who you really are, right? Because some people do some really weird things on social media. Well, that's a whole nother presentation we could do, right? Email, email and text. When you send those, you do not know what the person on the other end is going to look like, feel like, what they just got done doing when they open them. What if somebody just got the worst news in their life and they sit down and decide, okay, I need a break. I'm going to do emails now. And your email that you took all this care into crafting to be totally benign and non-threatening, all of a sudden, it's like they perceive it with the baggage they're carrying from this experience that they just had. And you didn't mean that at all. So if it's anything other than just some simple information that really can't be misconstrued, don't put in an email. Maybe you send an email that says, "Hey, can we grab a cup of coffee? I got a couple things I want to go over with you." Now, if you don't have a trusting relationship with that person, what's the first thing they're going to think? They're going to think that you're sitting down to tell them some bad news. So just letting you know, you might also want to go, "It's all good." It's all good because sometimes it's like, "Ooh, all right, I don't have to worry about that conversation." Phone call is way better, right? But you can't see the person. You can't see the person. You can hear their voice, but a lot of times if they shut down, you have no idea what they're doing. I mean, they could not be paying attention to you. That could be the reason. Or they could be getting upset about something that you're saying, but you can't sense that over the phone unless their voice cracks or they start to sound like they are feeling fearful or intimidated or something, or they got a problem with it. So phone is certainly better than email and text, but it's still not as good as in-person conversation. And in person, when I use those words, I mean you're sitting across the table from the person because we're going to talk about Zoom in a second. That is the best conversation because you see the person, you sense them, and you see all about them, right? You don't just see their face, which is what most of us just have our heads in Zoom. We see the whole person and their body language. And so you can take a pause and say, gosh, again, back to earlier things I mentioned, you seem to be upset about this, or, is there something going on? Be curious, is there something going on? Can I help you with something that may have nothing to do with what you're talking about? So in person is best. Making sure, though, that you always have ample space between you and the other person. I once had an office where when I sat to counsel somebody, their knee touched my knee. That's how small my little office was. And that's okay if you're talking about, hey, did you have a good time this weekend? But if you have to deliver something that's more serious, having touchy knees is probably not the best solution, right? Now, Zoom, which is so much a part of our lives. Our team at AACN, we're all over the country. We could not do what we're doing with this collaborative if we didn't come together in Zoom. But I will give my boss, Linda Cassidy, big kudos because she arranges that we have what we call a tea every week, right? And we just get on there. We're not supposed to talk about work. We're allowed to just have conversation about each other and what's going on in our lives. And then we also have a Zoom where we talk about what we're doing. That's separate from the tea. It's a huddle, and we talk about what we're doing and do we need any help from anyone? Linda sets that up at the beginning that it's okay for us to say, I could use some help with this, or I need to hand this off to somebody because these are both priorities and I can't get them both done. And I just think that that is a wonderful use of Zoom. But in Zoom, a lot of times you'll see people, they don't have their video on and they could be doing anything. They could be literally like glued to the screen, but they could be not even present at their desk. Okay. You can't see on Zoom if someone else is doing email or text messaging or writing out something, right? Would they do that if they were sitting with you in person across from a desk? I doubt it, right? But they will often do it on Zoom. So Zoom is better than maybe email or text, but you might have to control Zoom a little bit. I'm in some meetings where we say your video has to be on. And it's not because we're checking up on you. It's because we want to make sure we're all engaged with each other because that's the best conversation. Next slide, please. Okay, so anytime I talk about healthy work environment, I always show this slide of this monkey. And I say to people, gosh, I hope this is not the person you live with. But a lot of times you can figure out who this person is in your team. And they're the person that no matter what, they're inappropriate in their responses. They're rude, they're short, they're condescending, they do a power play. And you have to ask yourself, why do you tolerate this? Next slide, please. Because a lot of times we're just afraid to tell somebody they're acting inappropriately. Back at the beginning, when AACN was doing some work around healthy work environment, that company, Vital Smarts, they did this little experiment. And if you were at NTI that year, you saw the video. And it was a mother and son, and he had a science project he had to do, and they went and the son would butt in important lines that formed, and she would videotape the reaction. And so he would go to the best ice cream place and just get in front of people or the movie, the outbreak of the movie, and he'd butt in line, and no one would say anything to him. I mean, sometimes people would have like a verbal reaction to each other, but they didn't say anything to him. So they said, oh, that's because he's a kid. Kid can get away with anything. So the mother switched roles with the son, and she went and she interrupted a line. And somebody did say something to her. They asked her where she got her haircut. To me, that was proof right there that people they will not confront inappropriate behavior a lot. So I practice handling people with inappropriate behavior. And some of you have heard me speak, you know I use the airport because I will not run into those people again. So I go to a gate that is not the gate for my flight because that may be the person sitting next to me. And I will just go and sit next to them. And they've got their stuff all sprawled all over. And I'll say, I need to sit in this seat. And they look at me like, lady, don't you see there's like 20 other empty seats? And I'll be like, yeah, I know, but I have a superstition about flying and I have to sit in this seat. And so they reluctantly move their stuff most of the time, right? And I sit down and I get a chuckle because it takes guts. It takes guts to approach somebody about inappropriate behavior. So again, if you want to practice with somebody, I'd be happy to do that with you. I don't need to practice anymore. I'm pretty good at it. But you might need to practice with people who you don't know or a good friend that's just going to role play with you. Next slide, please. This is a favorite quote of many of us, and I think it drives home the reason why we do need to speak up. And to speak up, we want to be heard. And to be heard, we need to be a skilled communicator. But Martin Luther King Jr., he captured it when he said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. And for those of us that work in the healthcare profession, there are so many things that matter. There are so many things that matter, and we cannot afford to be silent about those things. Thank you very much.